Thank you for the warm hospitality. Delighted to be here in India for the first time. I grew up reading about India, but I'm here for the first. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me. I won't be long. I should introduce myself by saying I'm a true crime author. I'm the co-author of the book Courage to Face COVID-19 with Dr. McCullough. We researched and worked on the book together for about 2 years, and he was the medical expert in the book. I am an investigative author. I investigate true crime, whether it be crime committed by an individual, by an organization, or crimes of the state. I think that in order to understand what is in our world, it's important to understand. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm competing with.
Can we have a bit of silence, please?
I think it's useful to think about. Have any of you noticed how 20 years or so, I'm speaking mostly of the United States, we always seem to be going from one crisis to the next. In the early 2000s, we had this crisis of Islamic terrorism, the September the 11th, 2001 terror attacks. And then we in the United States, for years, we're just constantly being told Islamic terror. It's everywhere. And we have to be terrified of the next September the 11th attack. And this prepared the American people for the U.S. government to start invading all of these foreign countries. Started with Iraq, Afghanistan, then the United States military threw out Gaddafi out of Libya, and then there were these actions in Syria. In the year 2000, we had a financial crisis. The world financial system was collapsing. And we were told that unless the U.S. government, unless the U.S. federal, the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Congress, unless it created, we were introduced to a new idea, the idea of a bailout. The government would create hundreds of billions of dollars in order to bail out the financial system, in order to bail out the Wall Street banks. Now, this was quite a notable thing because it was the Wall Street banks who created the crisis. So if you follow the logic of this, it's, oh, there's a terrible crisis. No, it would seem that there were these fraudulent securities that were sold, and wow, it was a real idea, but we need hundreds of billions of dollars to bail out these institutions. And I think that's where the current crisis, in many ways, the seeds were sown for this. Because what Dr. McCullough and I call the biopharmaceutical complex of these pharmaceutical companies, industries, financial, and what they realized is if there's a crisis that confronts mankind in the form of an emerging infectious disease outbreak, again, we will see this massive creation of money that will go to anyone who is involved in these countermeasures. And I think that that's the last thing I would have everybody think about, this emergency countermeasures. So technically speaking, the vaccine is not a pharmaceutical product. It is literally, under U.S. law, the PrEP Act of 2005 legally defines these vaccines. These are emergency countermeasures for which the manufacturers liability. They have zero product liability. If you are injured or killed or a family killed, those who create and distribute the emergency countermeasures have no liability. So I was very impressed when I in India that there are these successful lawsuits that went all the way to the Supreme Court to have these vaccine mandates dropped. We've not had this kind of successful legal action in the United States, and I think part of the problem is the Americans have been told this isn't a pharmaceutical product, it's an emergency countermeasure. So if you start with this idea of a crisis will generate enormous amounts of public funding, the product manufacturers bear no liability. If there is an emergency declared and you are in the business of emergency counters, you will receive billions of dollars from the state. So what this is, I think, is an invitation to commit from the very beginning. So the way I think is useful to think about this crisis that mankind is there are many elements in the response to COVID that I would characterize as fraud. So I see this pandemic response as largely a form of organized criminal fraud. And I think once people begin to conceptualize what's happened to the world, we discover it's medical people can debate about efficacy and safety and all of this. I think in many ways it's useful to think of it as a form of crime, and that's what we all need to be thinking about, investigating, talking with our friends and family, and sharing with each other. Thank you.